The system that we're talking about is unsustainable. Some, as I was prepping for this, some say it's too fragmented, too process-oriented, and arguably too inefficient to deliver on the outcomes sought. And you had mentioned that Pathways is an initiative that sort of responds to this issue. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that policy and practice aspect of Pathways. Can you tell us a little bit more about the overarching goals?
Absolutely. Well, let me start by elaborating a little bit more on what the desired future state is, right? Because I think that brings some context about what then Pathways actually calls for. But the desired future state really of human services from our members' perspective is that it really be person and family centered, so that it's responsive to the individual that's coming to the door, not cookie cutter in its approach, and really more effective because it's really thinking about what the individual needs are. That it's integrated. And what I mean by that is that we have a lot of different program silos right now, just due to the nature of how we've set up our system in this country through different funding silos and different programs. And they really need to speak and communicate with each other much more than they do now. We think the desired future state has to be modern, right? Cost-effective, based on what are modern business models. That can be a challenge for organizations that have worked in certain kinds of environments that become institutionalized and hard to move through and beyond what their kind of status quo has been. And then I think it's really important that the desired future state, in addition to really focusing on those long-term outcomes, is accountable. And I think that I hear that probably more from my members than anything else, is that they want to see a system that they do believe in accountability. Sometimes I think that there's this notion that they don't, but they really want to see wise use of dollars, effective use, and actually getting to real outcomes. So what our Pathways effort really calls for is a couple of, or a few things that I think are worth highlighting. One is maybe certainly a sustainable relationship among all levels of government. So what does it look like? We have a certain structure in this country around the federal, state, and local structure that is constantly evolving. We've got to have it be as effective as possible and as dynamic as possible. And so our Pathways effort really calls for making sure that it's a true partnership and that there's commonality in the way that we approach finding solutions across the federal, state, and local level. To that end, there's also this conversation about having to think about how we govern in a different way, in other words, in a more shared way. There are a number of other partners who work in private industry, who work in this field and provide an incredible amount of insight. There are nonprofit organizations who help deliver services. We have to maximize those relationships and think about things, and what the words that often get used in our field are in a shared governance approach. So how do we think about our work not in our individual agency silos, but that we're actually, if you will, governing together. And then I think there's a big call for thinking about new funding models. What are new ways that we can actually finance the system? There is certainly a push for thoughtful but aggressive adoption of innovations. I can't tell you how many times I hear about incredibly successful efforts happening in states, in local jurisdictions that are having very real impact on communities and driving positive outcomes, but we don't have a very efficient way in our government sectors to elevate and scale those innovations across the board. And so I think there's room at all levels of state, local, and federal to think about ways that we help make that happen in a more real and effective way.